Hello, everybody. This is Michelle Wietek-Stephens, and she's going to talk about Liatris for Keweenaw Wildlands.
Hi, I'm Michelle Wietek-Stephens. I'm the owner of Designs by Nature U.P native plants. And we're a native plant nursery in Marquette, Michigan. And I was asked to talk a little bit about Liatris tonight. Oops, there we go. Okay. So Liatris is not a single plant. It's a group of plants, kind of like you would talk about aster. So Liatris is a genus of plants. There's 7 different species in Michigan. They're all stalks of purple flowers. And some of the other common names are gay feather or blazing star. They add a lot of late season color. So in the later summer into fall, you get a lot of goldenrods, you get a lot of yellow things, you get a lot of white things, not so much of the purple. So it's really nice to have something with a big pop of purple at that time of year. And they also have great texture and structure. They have stiff stalks. They're generally taller, and they add a lot of interesting foliage and flower texture to a garden. They grow from bulbs or corms, and they generally bloom in their 2nd year. The number of stems that each plant produces increases over time. And the interesting thing is that they bloom from the top down. Usually plants with flower stalks will continue growing their flower stalk while the ones on the bottom bloom. But a Liatris will grow the flower stalk to a set height depending on conditions and how much energy it has stored. And then the tip of the flower on the top will bloom and it'll work its way down the stem. So that's kind of an interesting characteristic. Beware the cultivars, as with anything. And we want to go with the straight native species, because when people breed plants to cultivate them for certain characteristics, they're breeding them for our eyeballs. They're not taking into consideration the other things that we can't see, such as ultraviolet markings on the flowers that are guiding insects, or chemical scents that are being released to trigger various insect behaviors or deter various insects. These plants have relationships with the soil microbes, and when we crossbreed for our visual pleasure, we can't determine what we're doing to that set of characteristics. And also, native plants have certain nutritional characteristics of the pollen and the nectar that the insects and birds need, and we can't tell how we're messing those up when we start crossbreeding for various characteristics. So, as with all native plants, you want to avoid quotation marks after the name. So Liatris spicata is probably the most cultivated. So if you see Liatris spicata kobold or floristan in quotes after it, you know that's not a straight native species, it's a cultivar. And if you're planting for the wildlife and the bigger picture, you want to avoid the quotation marks and stick with the straight native species. And I'm not sure why you would want to mess with Liatris anyways. They are tremendous pollinator magnets, just as they are. They're very popular with the large butterflies. We also get a ton of skippers on ours, and they're popular with bees, pollinating flies, and everything else. So they're very, very active in your garden and great for drawing in some of the showier insects. They're also really popular with birds. They're attractive to hummingbirds because of the color and the height and the flower shape. That picture in the upper left is in our greenhouse, so I can vouch for the fact that a hummingbird will fly right through the open windows of the greenhouse to get to a single Liatris plant. So imagine what happens if you have 20 in your garden. And then when the flowers are done, the birds will eat the seeds. And the bluebird down on the right isn't interested in either the nectar or the seeds, but it can feed the insects on the plants, and it can also use the strong stems as a perch to help it forage for the insects it needs for its young in the summer. So they're great bird plants. Like I said, there's 7 different kinds of Liatris floating around Michigan. We're going to talk about rough blazing star first, because it's the only one that's technically native to the UP. It also exists in the lower peninsula, so they can have it too. But up here, it grows in dry, sandy prairies and under jack pine. So it's a really great UP plant for a lot of our habitat. It's got little flowers that are tight to the stem, like buttons, and a lot of nicknames for it revolve around the term button. It's a little bit on the shorter side, 1 to 3 feet, depending on the soil. If it likes the soil better, it can get a little bit taller, and it likes medium to dry soils in full sun. Pretty much all the Liatris are full sun. They'll tolerate part sun, but they are more upright and happier in full sun. The next one we'll talk about is marsh blazing star. That one is probably the most commonly grown in gardens. It has the widest flower head, possibly the showiest. It's very tall. It can be very tall when it has good soil nutrition, and it likes a little bit wetter soil, more medium, richer soils. It's native to the Lower Peninsula pretty widely. And down there, Michigan Flora says it likes moist, sandy plains and shores, marshes, swamps, other areas that are well drained but still get fairly frequent moisture. Prairie blazing star is another showy one that is frequently cultivated in gardens. It's a little bit less tall. It likes wet to medium soil, or wet to medium dry soil in the sun. I've seen it in some very dry places in the UP along railroad tracks and roads. So once it gets established, it's pretty drought tolerant. Michigan Flora says that it's inventive both in the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula. That means it was probably brought here by people one way or another, either deliberately planted and then escaped, or else in areas where it grows along railroad tracks, it might have gotten transported as a dried flower accidentally, or as a hay or something like that. It is native to the states just south of Michigan, so it's not inconceivable that it could have migrated to southern Michigan, but it is inventive in both the Lower and the Upper Peninsula. Still does really well here, though. Northern blazing star is possibly my favorite. The flowers are looser. They're on stalks on the stems, and you get more of a cluster, loose cluster of flowers. So descriptions vary widely about how tall it is. If you read the descriptions for the plant out on the East Coast, they call it a 1-foot dune species, and they describe it as really short, tiny plant growing on the dunes along the ocean. And other sources of information will tell you that it's a 5-foot prairie plant. So I think this one varies a lot depending on the conditions that it's in. It's native to the Lower Peninsula. It grows all over down there, but it's really a good plant for the Upper Peninsula. It likes dry, sandy prairies, rocky shores, jack pines, aspen. So a lot of the habitat that we have up here, it just didn't make it across the lake on its own. There's 3 other Liatris in Michigan. 2 of them have a really tiny range downstate, so it's not certain if they were ever widely distributed across the state. So how do you use your species of Liatris? Can either be well-behaved or wild. So we talked about it adding a lot of structure and texture to the garden. On the left, you see the flower buds. Those are attractive in their own right. And then the pop of
excuse
color.
me. Sorry, Michelle, just a second. Somebody, I can hear somebody. So if you're not muted, could you please? Thank you.
Okay. Anyways, the flower buds have a lot of structure and texture, and they're pretty in their own right. And then you get that pop of color for the fall. And on the right there, you see the seeds, which are also quite pretty, fluffy, and to blend into the fall landscape really well, in addition to being useful to birds. If you want to go wild with it, it works really well naturalized into meadows, along roads, ditches, fields, hillsides, slopes. It likes the sunny sides of slopes where other things have difficulty growing, especially the rough blazing star on the left. The bottom right is prairie blazing star, and both those photos are from the UP. Or if you want to go more formal, it adds a lot of really nice structure to the garden. On the left is native grasses, blazing star and coreopsis. The top right is mountain mint and blazing star, and the bottom right is the marsh blazing star. That is the common one for gardens. And then this is possibly my favorite picture that I found for the presentation. This is the High Line in New York. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but I was excited to find that they have blazing star as part of their plantings. That was one of the first uses of drifts of native plants, big clusters of native plants, instead of the more scattered meadow planting idea. And it works really well. I don't know if any of you have ever read it, but there's a book called The Curious Gardener. That's a kid's book for your kids or grandkids. And it's about, it's a vision about how the plants might have come to the High Line. So I used to read that book to my kids when I was little, and I was very excited to see that blazing star is a part of that planting. So Liatris, it's not just one plant. There's several different kinds, and there's a variety of options depending on what sort of space and soil you have. They're all pollinator favorites. They're all really great habitat plants. They're excellent bird plants, and they add a lot of late season color, especially when everything is migrating or storing up food for the winter, texture and structure. So that's Liatris. Any questions?
That was wonderful. And I do have a question.
Shoot.
Those pictures in the High Line, it was in there with what I saw. There was a really pretty picture of it in there with a white plant. Was that like a mountain mint? Do you know?
The top right on this one?
Previous frame, previous slide.
This one?
No, the one before that.
Huh.
There, in the upper right.
Oh, this one with the upper right?
No, the one that you just had. That then
Okay.
The next one.
That one.
The next one.
The one just okay.
There you
That
go,
one
right there.
All right. So these are all rough blazing star. These are the 3 stages of rough blazing star. So the left is the buds early in the summer. The middle is in full bloom, and the right is the seed heads. And it looks like there's some goldenrod in the background.
Yeah. Can you go to the next slide?
Sure. That's the one that was just before it.
Right.
Yeah. Not sure which.
Nope.
Garden planting.
Nope. Sorry, don't. So you had it once, and I don't have to belabor the fact, but there was a slide with 3 photos from the High Line of Liatris.
Oh.
I think that did. I think you said they were from the High Line, and one of them had the Liatris in there with some really beautiful white flowers.
So this is the only photo I have of it with the High Line, and I'm thinking that this is hyssop on the left. And then this one had mountain mint on the right, upper right.
Yeah,
and
that's
I'm
what I
not
thought. I thought that was mountain mint, and I wanted to check because I thought, whoa, I could see if I could cram some in with my Liatris.
Yep, that one is mountain mint and prairie blazing star. And that's at my father-in-law's nursery downstate.
I didn't know. I didn't realize that. That's beautiful.
Any other questions?
Anybody else?
How does it do with wildlife, deer and rabbits?
So the deer will nip it. I mean, what won't they nip, right?
Right.
So they'll nip it. They haven't bothered it extensively, and we have a pretty heavy deer load here at our place. I had a lot of my customers complain about chipmunks eating the bulbs. So it seems like something you'd want to protect from rodents until they get well established. We haven't had that problem here, but we don't have, we have a lot of natural chipmunk predators.
I have a question, Michelle.
Yep.
In one of your slides, it says that they will bloom in the second year. So if I planted corms last fall, will they bloom this year?
They should.
Good. Okay.
Yep. I'm anxiously waiting for the marsh blazing star that I planted to go. It should go this year, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I can't remember. I planted 2 different varieties. I alternated them in the bed along the front of my yard that has the cultivar, the blue stem, big blue stem.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's gonna be really beautiful. So I hope it grows.
That should be a nice combination.
Yeah.
Okay,
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Michelle.
you're very welcome.